Hello, hello. Welcome back to Peak Northwest, an outdoors and travel podcast by the Oregonian and Oregon Live, dedicated to the adventure and exploration of our beautiful Pacific Northwest. I'm Jamie Hale.
And I'm Kiara Profena. Together we take you to some of the most beautiful and interesting destinations in our region, discussing where to go, what to do, and places to see. And today we're discussing something you definitely don't see every day, Pacific Northwest maple syrup.
That's right. When you think of states that produce maple syrup, you think of like Vermont, New York, probably, like Canada, like all of Eastern Canada, I think probably makes maple syrup, but you don't usually think about the Pacific Northwest. But there is a small maple syrup industry popping up here in the Northwest, with people in Oregon and Washington tapping local bigleaf maple trees in order to make some tasty syrup.
Exactly. And here to tell us all about that is Eliza Nelson, founder and director of the Oregon Maple Project, a nonprofit dedicated to educating people about big leaf maple syrup. So, Eliza, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, so first off, maybe you could just tell us a little bit about the Oregon Maple Project, what you all do, and what your aim is there.
Yes, we are a small nonprofit, education focused, and we have a sugar shack in Colton, Oregon, at the beautiful Camp Colton property. And we run workshops for any age people who are interested in learning about big leaf maple syrup. And we do field trips for school groups or groups of any kind, really. And we run a season long sugaring collective, which is designed for people who have access to their own trees for tapping and want to have a community that works together, shares information all winter long, and then culminates with a sugaring party. We boil our sap together in March, and we call it the community boil. It's a really great gathering around the maple steam.
It sounds like a lot of really exciting things happening around maple syrup and a really fun way to get people into it.
It is definitely something we all enjoy, and everybody who comes out has a sense of delight and wonder seeing the sap coming out of the trees. We are also a farm, a working sugar bush, as they call it, and we tap 75 trees on a tubing system with vacuum, and we also have lots of buckets on trees as well that people can interact with. So lots of hands-on experience when people come visit us.
And the syrup, can you tell us how big leaf maple syrup is different from other maple syrups that we might be used to?
It's really, really good. And it's the taste of the Pacific Northwest. It's something that most people don't have a chance to taste. So when anybody visits us for any reason, we always make sure that they get to taste our big leaf maple syrup that we make at Camp Colton. And the taste it's a darker, stronger, more complex syrup than sugar maple syrup that we're used to. It has a succession of flavors on your palate, and we love to hear people's descriptions of what they taste when they have a little spoonful. And we hear anything from sweet potato to toffee to coffee, espresso, real roasted flavors, and it's really often preferred as something to put in beverages or to use on in dressings or glazes, really to use with all kinds of cuisine. You can put it on your pancakes. It's expensive to put on your pancakes. It's delicious in all ways, but because of its really rich, complex flavor, people often use it for other culinary uses.
And a lot of these differences, right, stem from the type of tree that you're using. So that when we think of maple syrup, that stuff in Vermont, that's the sugar maple, which is a different species than our big leaf maple. Is that right?
Yes, the sugar maple is the main tree that's tapped for the syrup that we typically think of. And the bigleaf maple is one of the three native maples in the Pacific Northwest, and it is the biggest of all of our three maples. So it's the one we get the most sap from. It's very prevalent. Once you start paying attention to bigleaf maples in the region, you'll see them everywhere. And the sap of the big leaf maple is not as sweet as sugar maple sap, so it comes out of the tree probably just 1% sugar versus sugar maple sap is between 2 and 4% sugar to start. So we need to process it, boil it longer, and that's partly why it makes a darker syrup. We are we are definitely aware that our soils and our forest ecosystems are very different from sugar maple forests, and so the tastes may have to do also with just the ecosystem basically. And you look at the mosses and lichens and ferns and complexity that we have all winter long when we're tapping, and it makes sense that there'd be a richness to our sap and syrup that's different.
So you mentioned sap and syrup. Can you talk a little bit about the difference and what sap is?
Yes, one of the exclamations we often get from our visitors when they see sap coming out of a tree and when they taste it is, "Oh, that tastes just like water." And we say, yes, as part of our problem, the um, the water is what we need to get rid of in order to concentrate the tree's sugars that it's made through photosynthesis. So that's the sap is very watery to start. We run it through a reverse osmosis filter to begin concentrating the sugars even before we boil, which is the second method, evaporating all as much water as we can to get to syrup. And syrup is supposed to be about 67% sugar. So we have a long way to go from 1% to 67%. And with our reverse osmosis filter, we try to concentrate it to about 6% sugar. So it's really starting to get sweet. We often will freeze it until we have enough to do a boil. We like to have at least 100 gallons of sap to boil on our wood-fired evaporator. And then it will take many hours, a full day, sometimes day and a half, to get it into bottled syrup. And totally thicker, darker product than the tree water that we began with.
It's so interesting. I feel like, I've always thought of sap as the sticky resin on the side of a tree, right? And I think until I saw actual sap coming into a bucket at your place, at your farm. But that's pitch, that we think of the sticky stuff on the side of the tree, right? That's called pitch. And the sap is more, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, is sort of like the water that runs through a tree that the tree uses to be a tree, to do tree stuff. It's the water
Yes.
that the tree contains, right? And that is what you're taking out to make syrup out of.
Yes, exactly. And all trees have this sap, watery sap running in their vascular systems, and it's a fascinating, complicated um, miracle of trees, basically, that this is moving throughout their systems, that they're raising columns of water, sometimes hundreds of feet, taking it up through their roots and feeding their entire structure out to their very branch tips. And why this movement is happening in the winter, sort of the dormant season for the trees, and why there's sugar in the sap in the winter when not too much growth is happening in terms of buds and leaves and flowers, um, is an emerging science, and also a fascinating mystery in some ways still. But it has to do with the pressurizing of the tree in during freeze thaw cycles, and the efforts of the tree to avoid ice crystals forming inside its cellular structures. So it's really complex, and it's I think the scientific research is ever changing, emerging to understand the complexity of trees. But that's what we're tapping into, all that.
It sounds like leaving your faucet dripping when there's a freeze or something like that.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, there's so many interesting analogies that can help us try to wrap our minds around it all.
So you mentioned the process of turning that sap into syrup. Can you go back and talk a bit about how you are collecting the sap and tapping the trees, and what does that look like?
We are basically, one thing we love about sugar mapling is that it can be so simple. Really, all you need to do is make a little hole in the tree at the right time of year when the tree is pressurized, and the sap should come flowing out into whatever collection vessel you have. Now, that's that's the principle. We have to be really careful about how we make the hole to protect the tree. We have to have clean equipment. We have to have food grade equipment to make sure the sap is as pure as it can be to make a good healthy product. Um, and so a lot of what we do with our visitors is the interactive method of collecting with buckets. And that's really fun because you can see what each individual tree is doing. You can hear the sap dripping into the buckets kind of musically. And we end up naming our trees and getting to know them individually. And it's just very approachable in terms of using a cordless drill, a 5/16 inch drill bit, making a clean hole in the tree, using a little tapping hammer to tap in a spile or a spout, and then connecting that to a food grade bucket. We have aluminum buckets that we love. They're aesthetically pleasing, they sound good. The cold sap is really delicious to drink straight from them. And we also have a lot of trees that are connected together with tubing, food grade maple tubing from that we all buy from the Northeast. And it is a really efficient, clean way to collect a lot of sap. Basically, all the trees are connected together, and the sap is being pumped down with a vacuum pump to a central collection vessel, and it's a closed system, so we don't get debris or little insects in there. And with the vacuum pump, we really can pull more sap out of the trees, even when the sap run is slowing down on the bucket system. So that's what almost all producers who are trying to begin selling their syrup are doing. We definitely have learned this from Northeast production, and it's also a fascinating contraption that you set up in the woods. So there, those are the two main methods.
Is this pretty much what it looks like to harvest sap in the Northeast from the sugar maples? Is it kind of the same process?
Very similar, yes. And you can scale up the tubing systems to thousands and thousands of taps and very powerful pumps and really incredible systems. Um, and we could do that here. We have a vast amount of big leaf maple. The amount of trees that we have to tap in the Pacific Northwest is pretty astonishing. And so there are producers that are trying to scale up, and there's a possibility for that for sure.
So when you're talking about kind of sucking the sap out of all of the trees, is there a point where you can take too much from a tree, or is there a limit to how much sap you can get, and how do you know when that is?
That's a really great question. There, we have not studied for big leaf where the limit is, and I don't think we've even gotten close to it, given that we're just all still learning about big leaf maple and the possibilities with our tapping season. In the Northeast, there have been a lot of studies through University of Vermont and Cornell, really important studies about um, how much sap you can extract from a tree before diminishing its growth or damaging its health, and looking at growth at tree rings and seasonal growth patterns on trees that have been really attached to high vacuum pull systems for many years. And for the most part, we are not seeing a lot of a lot of difference in the trees that have been intensively tapped. Um, so I think the main thing that we know is that when we are placing a hole in a tree, just like any wound that a tree has, there's a scar. That's a wound that the tree heals over, and there's a scar there, and that area of vacuum tubing, or sorry, that area of xylem tubing where the sap is flowing will not be conductive until the tree adds more width, more growth. So we make sure that we rotate our tap holes around the tree in an organized way so that we're always tapping into new sapwood, and not tapping into scarred tissue.
Now, we've talked a little bit about the Northeast industry. I mean, obviously, the Pacific Northwest syrup industry is smaller, right? But can you give us any sense of scale? Like, how do you compare the Northeast industry to the Northwest industry?
Oh, scale wise, yes, definitely smaller group of people out in the Pacific Northwest. And the the Northeast has a really, really long history. It's an indigenous invention, and so that those were the first tappers, that the first peoples taught Europeans. So long, long history in the Northeast, in Canada, and certainly the big leaf maple has had many centuries of importance to indigenous people in the Pacific Northwest, but not as much of a history of using the sap for syrup out here. I'd say other differences are in the Pacific Northwest, our season is a lot longer and more variable. So the trick for us is to catch multiple sap runs throughout the winter. We don't have a deep freeze for many months like the Northeast has had. And usually they'll have one sap run, one big long breakneck sap run in the spring after a deep winter freeze. We have more freeze thaw cycles throughout the winter. So we've got to catch the wave and figure out when that's going to be. On good years, we've had 5 different sap runs. And in between the sap runs, we have to make sure everything gets cleaned out, all of our tubing, all of our buckets, everything we use has to be thoroughly cleaned because typically in between the sap runs we have warm temperatures. We've got these warm, rainy periods where bacteria will grow in our equipment, and while that will not affect the health of our product, it will affect the taste of our product. So we can boil away any bacterias, any bacteria, yeast, anything like that can get killed, and won't be a problem health wise in our product, but it really will change the taste. So trying to keep everything as clean as possible, we are learning, is really important to a high quality syrup. I'd say other differences in the Pacific Northwest are that we probably are going to have a lot of variation in syrup from different locations. And we probably aren't going to be aiming toward a grading system like sugar maple syrup has, because of our microclimates, because of the complexity of taste that we can get in our syrup. I think the idea is that these are really boutique syrups coming out of small farms, and I think that's appealing for sure to the food culture of the Pacific Northwest.
So, where can you buy big leaf maple syrup?
Ah, yes. We get that question a lot, and we wish we were selling more. We are starting to sell more at the Oregon Maple Project. So if you do come to any of our workshops, you have the chance to buy very cute little bottles from our farm. And Oregon State University has a website as well called Oregon Tree Tappers, and there's a producers tab on that site. And Bigfoot Maple Products is one of them, and Neil's Big Leaf Maple Syrup in Washington is another one. So there are starting to be small commercial producers out there that are selling it, often online sales. You will start to see it in farmers markets and in farm stands. It's starting to become more available, but even the small commercial producers do sell out every season. As soon as a sap run is done and the product is bottled, it tends to sell pretty quickly.
Well, so you said, Eliza, that there's so many big leaf maple trees here that could be tapped. Obviously, it's a new practice here, but what stands in the way of the Northwest maple syrup industry from growing? I mean, what's it going to take for us to get this stuff in, like, say, the grocery store?
Yes, not. And that's an interesting question because I wonder if we will end up with it in the grocery store. I wonder if it will stay more as a farm product, as a farmer's market product, locally sourced, locally produced. But for sure, we would like to produce more in the Pacific Northwest than we are now. And what it will take is more people that are willing to scale up into the larger tubing systems with high vacuum to basically get more sap every season from every sap run, and also then having really state of the art technology for reverse osmosis and for boiling. So getting more people interested and willing to take the slight financial risks that will pay off pretty quickly. Oregon State University has established through a study that this is a viable economic opportunity for people who have forest land, and it's an excellent way to work with forests. It's a beautiful non-timber forest product, and has a lot of benefits to our forest ecosystems. So yeah, I think getting more people aware and interested, and developing a community here that is learning together and sharing information. We already have a producer association in Oregon that's part of the national producers in the United States. So we're on the map as syrup producers now in the Pacific Northwest, and finding access to these trees is another thing. The stands of maples are vast, but getting to them can be tricky, and creating systems where there aren't roads, and where the terrain is steep, and where we're bushwhacking through all kinds of other plants, even in the middle of winter. There are some challenges that way, but it's definitely something that is growing for sure. The movement.
It sounds a bit complicated with all of the different factors you have to think about when trying to tap a tree. It's not just like poking a hole in the middle of the forest and collecting the sap. So, is it also expensive to get into this, or what other challenges are there?
Yeah. Uh, well, we do want to re-emphasize that you can begin with just what you have. When a lot of us start, we we use our own cordless drill. We use a drill bit that we might have already on hand. We use a recycled food grade bucket, and maybe we buy a little bit of maple tubing and a few spiles, and that costs probably $25 at the most to tap several trees. So you can start off small. You can use a camp stove in your backyard and some buffet pans to do your first boil. So really to see if it's doable with trees that you might have access to. There's not a lot of money involved to get started. When the Oregon Maple Project started and got our wood-fired evaporator, which has a high capacity for boiling hundreds of gallons of sap, and our initial tubing, we spent less than $10,000 to get started. So that would be a small producer. So, it's almost a hobby size producer.
Well, so kind of circling back around to the Oregon Maple Project, I mean, if folks are listening and they're saying, gosh, I'd love to try some maple syrup, I'd love to see sap coming into little silver buckets hanging, charmingly in the sides of the trees in the forest. How can they find out more information? How can people get involved with you?
Yeah, we have a website, OregonMapleProject.org, and we list all of our programs on the website. There is the final sugaring workshop of the season coming up on March 8th. So that's a great opportunity to just come for a couple hours and taste syrup in our sugar shack and see our sugaring operation and help collect sap, get some hands-on experience. There still are field trip slots for school groups and all age groups to come during March, and we will definitely have a full set of programs going next season as well. Typically, our season runs from November through March, so we're coming up towards the spring when the trees will bud out into their beautiful big leaf maple flowers and then leaf out, and that's when we take out our taps and clean everything up and get ready for our season next year.
Wow, amazing. Well, Eliza, thank you so much for taking the time to educate us about big leaf maple syrup. Folks, I mean, I guess it's a little bit hard to find still, but I mean, it seems like this is something if you can find on the store or your farmer's market or wherever, check it out.
For sure.
All right, folks. Well, that will do it for us for today. Until next time, you can watch our videos on the Oregonians YouTube channel and view all of our travel and outdoors coverage on OregonLive.com/travel, as well as HereIsOregon.com.
Please leave us a rating or review if you enjoy the show, and if you want to support this podcast as well as our local journalism, please consider a subscription to Oregon Live. You can find details at OregonLive.com/subscribe. Also, if you're a fan of the show and you're interested in potentially sponsoring it, you can get in touch with our marketing people at advertise@oregonian.com. This episode of the show is produced by me alongside Jamie Hale, Teresa Mahoney, and Vicki Connor.
Stay safe and happy travels, everyone. Until next time, we leave you with this 10 seconds of Zen.